Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. Now before I talk about the movie itself, you may notice that I'm talking a little bit quieter. There are people asleep in my household right now, but that's how committed to this little YouTube channel I am. I went and saw Aquaman 2 earlier today, got home and immediately started watching Rebel Moon so I could get both reviews out. By the way, I'm at 700 subscribers now, so thank you guys for making that happen. Now let's talk about Zack Snyder for a minute. I don't think there's a more polarizing director out there. And you know what? I can't tell which group I despise more. The Zack Snyder haters or the Zack Snyder fanatics who want him reinstated in DC, who were campaigning for the Snyder Cut and claiming he can do no wrong. I don't know, just why does everybody have to be so extreme and fanatical? I like some Zack Snyder movies. There are others that I don't like. I have nothing against him as a person, but I don't kiss his ass either. So Rebel Moon came to Netflix this weekend, and it's actually a two-parter. This is part 1, A Child of Fire. Part 2 will come out, I believe, in April. It's rated PG-13, but allegedly there's an R-rated cut as well. More alleged information about this, and my source is the internet, so take this with a grain of salt. Supposedly, Zack Snyder took this idea and pitched it to Lucasfilm, and when they wanted nothing to do with it, he went off on his own and decided to make it his own original sci-fi epic. And man, you can definitely tell it was inspired by Star Wars. We have this strange galaxy that is ruled by this entity called the Mother World, clearly a spin on the Empire in the world of Star Wars. And they're a fascist, Nazi-inspired militant power who's running everything. There's an open rebellion, and in addition to that, there's a bunch of other people who are just living their lives on their own planets, kind of minding their own business. Enter Sofia Boutella as Cora, a woman with a mysterious past who lives in a simple farming village. This village is visited by a representative of the Mother World, played by Ed Skrein. They make some demands, some threats, and thus our characters must rise up and fight back against the Empire, the Mother World. Yes, it does sound very familiar, and it is derivative. You can see specific moments from this that feel directly taken out of Star Wars. But you know what? I'm not going to hold that against Rebel Moon because I like original sci-fi, and it's kind of impossible to make original sci-fi and not at least take some elements from classics that we already know. And it wasn't just Star Wars that this took inspiration from. I also saw elements of Dune, Guardians of the Galaxy, and even something like Ghost in the Shell, particularly in the environments and the creatures. But I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with taking inspiration from other properties as long as you make something of your own with them. And love him or hate him, you got to admit that Zack Snyder has catchy visuals. Rebel Moon has plenty of eye candy when it comes to planets, alien creatures, explosions, shootouts with laser beams that also feel very Star Wars inspired. Yeah, maybe he goes a little too far with the derivative nature of some of these elements. Also the slow-mo. If there's one critique I have of Zack Snyder that I wish he would just chill out with, it's the slow-mo. You can do it every once in a while, but I swear every action sequence in this movie has at least like 5 slow-mo shots, and they go on for a long time, and it really slows things down, and it's just kind of annoying. I also really enjoyed the world building. They start with this small, humble farming village that really doesn't have anything to do with the bigger conflict that's going on around it. I like that. At first I was like, I don't know how I feel about this Cora character, but then they start to pull back layers of her backstory, and I'm like, okay, this is really intriguing. I have no idea why critics are hating this so much. It really does start out great, but unfortunately after that initial hook, it starts to become repetitive, derivative, and for lack of a better term, it just starts to feel empty. Once Cora decides that she wants to rise up against the Mother World and find other people to recruit, it turns into this repetitive string of scenes where they travel to different planets, recruit a character, maybe there's a brief action sequence, and then rinse and repeat. And they never stop to really make you care about a lot of these side characters, which is really disappointing considering this is a part 1. If anything, its job should be to establish the characters, make us care about them, and boy does that third act want you to care about the characters, but the movie didn't do any of the hard work to do that. Besides Sofia Boutella, who is really good, I think, there are some other standouts in the cast. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Mikhail Hausman as Gunner, a clear standout for sure. Not much else to say on the hero side of things, unfortunately. I did really like Ed Skrein, though, as this Mother World general. He was so great as this guy who seems really cool on the surface and friendly, but, you know, you do one thing to deceive him or wrong him and he will snap on a dime. Unfortunately, a lot of the characters that are assembled together on this team, I couldn't even really recall their names. Other characters and plot points are brought up early on in the film and then never even addressed again in the ending. And I know, again, it's a part one, so part two can pick things up and continue these storylines. But for instance, Anthony Hopkins voices this android that's introduced in the beginning, one of the most compelling characters in the film, and then they never touch on him again. It was such a shame. I was like, you had something good and you couldn't run with it. Instead, you had to introduce all these other characters that have very little going for them other than some cool posing. That's about it. That's all they have to them. There's no depth. So yeah, this movie's big in scale. It's nowhere near as bad as critics are saying, but it just left me with a fairly empty feeling because the characters are not given the depth they deserve, and the world doesn't feel as fleshed out as it should be because it feels so standard in the way it hops from planet to planet with the sole purpose of building this team that I don't feel connected to yet. However, I am completely open to part two redeeming this, so hopefully when that comes out in April, I think it is, I'll have more good things to say about it. But for now, let's give part one, A Child of Fire, 2.5 stars. Pretty middle of the road. It's also worth noting that supposedly Zack Snyder is already preparing to release an R-rated director's cut. Can we just stop doing that? Like, the fact that he's already planning it before the reception of this PG-13 cut has really been addressed is kind of weird. Like, why was Netflix apprehensive about releasing the R-rated version to begin with? It's not like they're going to lose out on ticket sales. This isn't playing in theaters, at least not in a wide release. Regardless, I'm going to turn it to you guys. Let me know in the comments what you think of Rebel Moon Part 1. Is it as awful as critics are saying? This has got like a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes. Kinda harsh, even for Zack Snyder. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.